What is up, everybody? Welcome back. It is another episode of Just Stories with BT. This is, of course, season 3, which means we are focusing the entire season on amazing authors. And this week is no exception. So I have a really exciting guest this week. So welcome Kerry Wekelo to the show. She's the author of Culture Infusion that just came out, along with a bunch of children's books, which we'll talk about. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So to kick it off, instead of you having to be on the spot and explain yourself or some of your history to people, which is awkward and weird, I'm going to do it for you. Okay. So I'm going to give your life story in like 30 seconds, and then you can tell me what I missed. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
Okay. So this is Kerry, as I said, the author of Culture Infusion. So here we go. So she was born in Waynesboro, Virginia, but she grew up in Shenandoah Valley.
Shenandoah Valley, yeah.
Shenandoah Valley. So I'm going to connect you to someone after this. I had a guest, this is crazy, a couple episodes ago from the same town, which is like seems
Waynesboro?
crazy. Yeah, no,
Really?
Shenandoah Valley.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So
Very good.
because I remember being like, wait, how do I say this? And then I saw it on your thing. I'm like, this is crazy. So anyway, where she grew up, she was really into sports, basketball, volleyball. She became an editor for her school paper, a little premonition on what you do for a career. Her first job, she worked in the family business. She pulled weeds, she did inventory, she did other stuff with the business. She ended up going to Virginia Tech, where she got a BS in finance and marketing. Her first job out of college was Accenture. And then she went back to school, got her master's degree in information technology, which is impressive. And then she became a financial manager. Kind of worked her way up the corporate ladder until 2005. She joined Actualize Consulting as a managing director, and now is the chief operating officer of Culture Infusion in HR. Along the way, she became a certified yoga teacher. She became a life coach. The most important thing in the world happened to her, which is she became a mom. She has 2 amazing kids, Audrey and Blaine. And then she started writing. So before she got into business books, she actually wrote a bunch of award-winning children's books, which we're going to talk about. And then eventually realized I needed to blend what she knows from the business and the corporate world with her mindfulness, wisdom, and she created her first business book, Culture Infusion, which focuses on 9 principles to create and maintain a thriving organizational culture. And then here we are.
Wow, that was pretty good. Can I get that? I'm gonna have to get the transcript.
Yes, you may have. You can download, you can have it, whatever you want.
Yeah,
So,
no, thanks for having me. This is fun.
yeah. So tell me, what did I miss? Like what do they need to know about you from your, childhood or growing up that kind of led you to where you are? What would you add to that?
I think growing up in a family business helps. I mean, the one piece is that with Actualize, I have helped grow that business since 2005. So we're going on, next year will be 17 years. So it's been quite a ride, but I think I just have like more of an entrepreneurial spirit for sure. And just learned a lot in a family business, which still is running to this day.
And what's the business? What do they do?
It's manufacturing. It's hard to explain. They sell interchangeable test adapters. We'll just leave it at that.
Oh yeah, interchangeable test adapters.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so tell me, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Obviously you wrote children's books and then now this book, but like, what was it you think? Is there anything from your childhood or growing up or school or college that kind of steered you in that direction to want to become an author?
I've always shared from a writing perspective. So if you go back to like in high school, being involved with a newsletter, it was always I would do something or see something that maybe wasn't going right and I would want to write about it. So my mind in general just writes and communicates through stories. And the children's books, I was teaching yoga in an after school program with my kids, and I wanted to have themes and fun things. And so I did books for both of my kids. They have their own titles and such. And a funny story is my son, for author day, he said that he was himself, and his teacher wrote me this email saying that she didn't appreciate that he lied about being in a book. And and he he comes home, he's so upset, he's like, she doesn't believe me. And I said, well, buddy, you should have brought your book with you, that has your name on it. So anyways, I emailed her back. I said he actually does have a book named after him, and he brought the book to school, and he was able to have a little moment of fame that he was a character in a kids yoga book. So, but that's
That
where
is
I kind of
awesome.
started. It was really like wanting to be able to share and wanting to be able to share my own message, and then giving them something fun to have. And one of the books I wrote is If It Does Not Grow, Say No, which is just, that was like sheer desperation to get my kids to eat vegetables with fun activities. So it's very hands-on, I think, and very storytelling is what I do. And then basically what happened with Culture Infusion is growing the company. When we first started the business in 2005, we were super focused on financially getting the business up and running and operationally, that we weren't really focused on our people. So in 2010, when we made that shift to focus on our people, all the programs and such, and then I would write about them. I would get published. And back then it was like actual magazines. Now there's blogs, and you do a lot of podcasts, but I would get published on each. So let's say I was talking about handling a challenging
Mhm.
situation, I would write about it. And so I just kept building all these programs, and I kept writing. So when one day, when our attrition had gone from 33% to down to 3%. One year we didn't even have anybody leave the company. I was like, oh my goodness. And the partners were like, what you're doing is really working, and let's do a program. And that's what we were calling. And then I realized I actually had a book. So I was writing it along the way.
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
Hmm.
to go back to your story about your son, it reminds me of, I saw a couple weeks ago, there was this like picture rolling around, but it was of this kid, and he was in his elementary class, and he had said, I think it was like same kind of thing, like not author day or whatever, but bring in someone from your family or tell someone about your family. And he had told the whole class that his cousin was Superman. Did you see this?
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah. And so like, and his classmates were making fun of him, and his teacher did the same thing, like sent this note home, like, hey, your son is making up these stories or whatever. Well, I can't remember, his cousin or his uncle or whatever is Henry Cavill, the guy that plays
Oh,
Superman in all the
nice.
movies, is like legitimately like his
Like
uncle or whatever.
legit.
So he found out about it, and he came to the school in his full-on outfit from the movies,
Oh,
and literally
wow.
walked his son to school, like, or his nephew or whatever it was, and of course blew everyone away. And same thing, I'm sure the teacher was like, oh my gosh, I can't
Oops,
believe this
sorry.
just happened.
So sorry. Calling your child a liar, and they're really
Yes.
not.
Yeah, and I actually have, it's funny, I have not a kind of a similar story as your son. So when I grew up, so my dad was an elementary school principal like forever. So he retired as an elementary principal, and he wrote children's books on the side. And my mom's a graphic artist, and she's an amazing watercolorist and kind of can do it all. But so she was the illustrator, and they produced, I don't know, like 8 or 9 children's books. But one of
Wow.
them that's dedicated to me, of course, is called Report Card. And it's about this kid that like he basically he gets a bad report card, and so he hides it under his chair, and the entire book is this long elaborate lie, to get out of it. And then he gets up and it falls out or whatever, and
Is
there's
it a
always
true
like these
story?
lessons in them, but it's funny.
Is
So
it a
that was the
true
one.
story?
No, it's not.
I was gonna
However, I would say that, yeah, from time to time as a kid, I might have pulled long
say. Okay.
tales, so maybe there was
Okay.
some inspiration there.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
So tell us, give us the 10,000 foot, kind of breakdown of Culture Infusion. What's it about? What's the motivation behind it? And why would a reader want to get it, right?
Sure. I mean, it's really, how would you run a business, and whether it's small or large, but it's 9 principles to create and maintain a thriving organizational culture. And the reason I use the word infusion is because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to have a wellness program and do one event and check the box, right? It has to be this culture that you're constantly focused on the well-being of your team. And that has to be done throughout the year. And so the principles are around providing intentional leadership, how do you communicate effectively as an organization? How do you support the personal wellness, work-life balance of your team? How are you handling challenges when they come out? And how are you also aligning your goals as a corporation with your teams and their aspirations, so everybody's getting the most out of that? And especially in the last couple of years, how are you encouraging team connection? How are you checking in to know what your team really wants and needs from you as an organization? So I think that open communication is very huge. There's a lot of just really easy tips, and it's from a case study, and it's actually what we do at Actualize Consulting. So it's very easy to read. I tell a lot of stories about what we've done as an organization.
Yeah, could you, I know I hate to put you on the spot,
Oh,
are there
sure.
any stories that you like, that you love from the book, or examples that, so we could kind of get a flavor for it?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is I used to think, oh, I have to have all the answers, right? But you don't. It's really what does your team want and need? So we'll do surveys. I mean, one of the main things is if I'm sitting here thinking, what should I do? My first go-to now is, okay, let me just send out a quick survey, even if it's one question for the team. What do you want to do for this social, or what do you think about the goal, the goal form? I mean, we're getting ready to go into that end of the year to do our performance reviews. And every year I do a new goal setting form and incorporate what people, want out of it. So I think it's that, it's not really a story, but it's a practice of not being afraid to survey your people. But the thing if you're going to survey, you need to make sure if people have ideas, if there's themes that you're not going to implement, you need to tell them why you're not implementing them, for sure. It's been
Yeah.
something is helpful, because then people want to give feedback if they really think they're going to be a part of the change within the organization.
Yeah. And what do you think, I mean, I know that, the obviously just even in the title, like trying to create a thriving organizational culture. It sounds, I know everyone wants to do it. Every company obviously wants to have a great culture. But what do you think is what is the core things that companies have to do, like the minimum they have to do to have a great culture?
Minimum is actually listening to what people are saying, and when you're looking at what they want to do in their career, making sure that they have the support to do that. And that could be both personally and professionally, especially during the pandemic. And even this year, we're seeing people needing different working arrangements and schedules. Maybe they're doing a reduced hours for something that's going on personally in their life. But I think listening to what they need out of their career. And then you have people who are like, I really want to get promoted this year. So asking what they want, what do they want to accomplish this year, and then helping support them to get to that next level. Or maybe they just want to stay flat, whatever they want, and actually supporting them in that. And I think that that's what I've heard from people, is that maybe a company would say that they would do that, but they actually didn't do it.
Mm,
Right. Like if you say, this is what I want, I will do everything in my power to make sure it happens. Right. Like I'm accountable for that.
mhm.
Granted, the other person has to do the work, right? But I will give them the opportunity. Or if it's like, hey, I have this personal situation going on right now and I need to go down to, reduce work schedule. Like, okay, well, that might not be really the best thing for the organization, but if that's going to, help you out, we'll make it work.
Yeah. And what do you think, what is your thought when it comes to culture? And as you mentioned, work balance and,
Mhm.
being flexible, because during COVID, most employers had to, change out how they've done things, change out the workflow, change out where people are working, but as we move through COVID, and hopefully we move through it this year, uh, I've heard a lot of companies now they're trying to retract, right? Like realizing, hey, you know what, actually we need people in the office. Actually, it takes longer to onboard. It takes longer to finish projects. The culture is fading. What do companies do, that have all these employees remote now, and they're saying that, hey, we feel like our culture's eroding or we're not getting things done?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think there's going to be some sort of hybrid. People are going to demand that from what I'm seeing, and even our clients, they're not going back 100% yet either, because we're a consulting company, so we have a lot of different clients. So I'm
Mhm.
fortunate to see a lot of different what's happening right now, and you see people wanting that balance of being home and then going back into the office. So, I mean, with that, I mean, I think it's super important to make sure that you have ways that you're connecting and communicating and with your teams, because yeah, there is something to be lost. I mean, I was just at a wedding this past weekend, and my cousins are it was my cousin's wedding, and they're younger than me, and that generation, I mean, they can work from anywhere, they can do whatever they want, and I definitely see there's a loss there for them because they don't have those interactions with people that they might have had before. So I think it's really important to create those opportunities. If you aren't going to be in the office, how do you create that team connection
Mhm.
virtually? But then also, how can you still get people together physically, even if they're not going to be in the office? So I think it takes a lot of work and effort. And I've been fortunate that I've been managing a remote workforce for the last 16 years. And it's been at the forefront of how do I keep people connected? But you have to do a variety of things. So
Mhm.
even if you're going to do virtual events, you have to have different types of events because it's not going to always appeal to everybody. And then I've seen some people who just aren't participating. So I'm like, what would you like to do? Right? Like how could we engage you with other people? And they're like, oh, well, I'd rather do like small group lunches. Okay, fine. So give them Uber Eats, have a group lunch, right? So you really it takes a lot of time and effort to connect people for sure. But I do think you still have to do some stuff in person. And maybe if people aren't going in all the time, at least quarterly, you're getting people together as a team in person because there's just that connection that you have if you've met somebody face to face. It's just different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's an interesting time, I mean, I struggle with that balance all the time. Yeah, the same as you have employees across the country. And so it's, you're trying to figure out what the best method is and how do I get people together. Cause I guess maybe to your point, maybe it's generational, but for me, I need like the face to face, like
Hmm.
literally like it recharges me, and I've been blessed to be at a great company that unfortunately I've been able to be hybrid ever since I started. But even during the pandemic, outside of that one crazy month where it was like you couldn't get toilet paper, I've just been going to the office a couple days a week, and so it's so at least able to get it in small doses. But I think, you know, going back to you, right, and this career, and obviously like you've had a lot of success, and as you mentioned, and it kind of led you to writing the book. But leading up to that, if you look back at your career, can you tell us a story around a time when you didn't succeed, when you failed, and kind of what happened and how you made it through?
um, I don't know that I necessarily failed per se, but I had a really rough summer, I can tell you.
Yeah, tell us
um,
about it.
I've always been in consulting, and I was on this project and I've used to do vendor evaluations where you'd go in and and this was for a military program, but you would want to implement a different software system, and you're evaluating what would be the best software system for that company or that organization to implement. Well, I was earlier on in my career, and everybody on my team had some sort of conflict of interest. So it was a 4-person team, and then it ended up being just me. Um, and I think, I mean, not that I failed because I ended up succeeding, but the team was very lean. But what I learned from that was that I can pretty much do anything if I put my mind to it. Going down to when they had the vendors come in for doing the in-person sites, which now probably would never even happen. But we were
Yeah.
in this hotel, and there was a really rah-rah people beside us, like a sales organization. And the colonel who was on the project, he like, came up to me. He was like, you need to get this organization to stop talking. So of course I go to like the hotel manager and I'm like, can you get them to stop, stop doing that? And they did nothing. And then he, like, after 3 times, he like came up to me and he was like, I don't really care what you do, but you need to make them stop because we can't do anything. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, early 20s. I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I can't go back in there like with them not being quiet. So I literally walked into the room and like I was a participant and I raised my hand and I said, we're next door. And so they ended up being quiet. And then after that, I definitely gained the respect of the colonel and the project team because I made it happen. And it just gave me a lot of confidence that you can put your mind to anything and you can make it happen. And like, it was an out of town project. I didn't even go home on the weekends to make it work. And, my dad was like, at the time I thought I was going to go crazy, but he said, you always learn the most from the hardest situations and your biggest challenges. And he was right, because after that, everything seemed so much easier.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's hilarious. I remember, I was the person in the other room in my career. Yeah. Like
Okay.
legit. Because I've always done like huge trainings. And in my career, especially like over the last like 15 years, I've done a lot of, remote hotel training events and that kind of thing. And I'm usually the facilitator and up there doing games and like whatever, like pumping music. And I remember once we were at this really nice Hotel del Coronado in downtown San Diego, like, on Coronado Island. And same thing, this nice hotel. And we were in this room and we had this like kind of game theme in this, was like a 3-day thing where people are competing and saving tickets and all this kind of stuff. So between every event, we had set up all these games. And yeah, I just didn't even think about that. Like there would be other people in the hotel. And it was like, there was like, I can't remember what it was something. It was like a dental conference or something.
Oh boy.
Something very like stagnant. And they were shared a wall with us. And same thing, like multiple times, like the person would come on and be like, so we're in the middle of this like keynote and we can't really hear because you're blaring, 90s hip hop. And I'm like, well, like, dang it, so anyways, so I feel it, but I remember like we turned down, we figured it out. So if you ask,
ask nicely. Yes. People will help you out.
I tell, it's funny, I'm sure you've done this as a parent, but, I always think about so many business lessons, also apply to parenting, and just a couple of weeks ago, my son and I were riding like our e-bikes and we rode to this new ice cream shop in this little town of Carlsbad where we live. And there's this new kind of ice cream where they use, it's like the freeze stuff. What is that? Like nitro? No.
It's something.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So hydrogen, something like that. So they just put the milk and your toppings, and then they put the stuff in, so it comes like smoke, and then it gives you ice cream. And I actually thought the ice cream was horrible. It did not taste good. The experience was cool, but anyway, so you pay like $7 for this little thing, and my son gets it, and we're like, oh, let's go ride across the street to the beach. We'll watch the waves and eat our ice cream. Sound like a good idea. And so we're on our e-bikes though. And I'm like, are you sure you can hold it? And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm like, are you sure? It's like, yeah. So he literally just goes like 5 feet on his bike and drops it. He hasn't even had a bite yet. And it just empties out. And he's like, oh my God, life's over, right? And I'm like, it's not a big deal. I go, just go inside and tell them what happened. I guarantee you they'll give you another one. And he's like mortified. He's like, there's no way. They're not going to give us another one. All this stuff. I'm like, Tristan, like, it's okay, man. Like, I'm telling you, you go in, you tell them what happened. They're going to make you another one. And he's like, no. And we go back and forth. I'm like, just ask. You'll never know if you don't ask. Right. So we go in there, of course. And the guy's like, oh, that's awful. I'll make you another one right now. And just whips him one up or whatever. And we walk outside and I'm like, listen, you see, like in life, you oftentimes make up these narratives in your head and you make things, these huge things. But at the end of the day, A, you never know if you don't ask. But B, usually people want to be helpful and they want to come up with solutions. And so generally they'll help you out, and so it was a good lesson, but it's like, to your point, like, you're sitting there thinking like, I could never, figure out a solution, but, oh, I'll just go talk to them. And most people want to help you out,
That's right. No, and that's a really good lesson for your son as well. And I agree. I think pretty much any principle that I teach at work, it definitely translates to my kids and just life in general, especially around communication and how do you handle challenges, because communication and challenges are always top of the list of things that people need to work on and be more mindful of, for sure.
Yeah. So tell us, what was the difference between writing kids books and then writing a business book?
Well, a lot longer process and no pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, no, well, those were just those were easy, and they were more, oh, telling a story or teaching a lesson, right? Just really short and sweet and to the point. Whereas a business book is a lot more detailed, and you really have to pull it together, tie things together, and again, but you're still creating a story and hands-on things that people can do in the business world as well as personal too. I think it all kind of translates.
Yeah. And what was the feeling like the first time you opened the box and saw your book actually done?
Relief, I think. Yeah. Just, that it was done, and something that I could use as a tool. And that's really what I do. It's more of a tool and a teaching, a way to teach seminars and teach team building and work with clients on, how can they make their organizations a little bit better too, that people really want to be a part of.
Yeah, and what do you think is a good, I mean, obviously, I guess it depends on the industries, but like when someone goes through the book, and especially if they're struggling with retention and things like that, around culture, like what should a company's goals be around retention? And, how much do you think that, having this kind of culture can reduce that?
Well, I think it definitely, I mean, focusing on your people is your culture, right? So, really taking a pulse on your people, I think is the biggest thing with culture, because not every organization is going to be the same. Um, but I think every company's different, and I don't think you want people to leave, and you want to be able to bring new people on, right? So I don't think that there's this huge, but you don't want like half of your organization to leave within the year, because then it's going to be hard to maintain what you have as an organization. So I think some turnover is healthy, right? But you want to make sure, and I mean sometimes people just want to do something different in their life. So I think there's, I don't want to put a lot on that, but for us, like we've won tons of awards, like Great Place to Work, um, Washington Post top, one of the top cultures, best and brightest, and those surveys are based on going to our employees, and they're actually filling out the surveys. So I think metrics like that, like employee satisfaction, is much better way to like really put a pulse on how well you're doing as an organization. And then also how well are you profitable, are you having innovation within your organization? I think those are really good metrics to look at.
Yeah, for sure. And what is your thought on, and maybe you see it in your clients out there, but this is a topic that I talk about a lot. And I'm like, we're trying to figure out the right method, but what do you feel about promoting from within versus bringing in external talent?
Mm, mm. I'm a big proponent of promoting from within, absolutely, because they know that your internal people really know about your organization and that culture, that and the vibe that you have as an organization, and then they can help with that. Now, sometimes you might not have expertise, and then I do think it's a good idea. But if there's a position internally, um, with somebody internally, and you can maybe groom them and really mentor them to be in that position, absolutely, it's worth the effort, and they're going to be more loyal to you,
Mhm.
versus if you bring somebody in. Now, many times you might not have the expertise. Like there's like been situations where we actually needed an expert in a certain specific area that nobody on our team had it, right? So then
Yeah.
you have to. But I think if you kind of use that as a model, um, people are like, oh, they understand, right? And then they also can raise their hand. I mean, one of the questions
Mhm.
we ask on your goal form is like, what do you want to do in the next year? What do you want to accomplish in the next year, so we can help people accomplish those goals?
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, one of the things that I see quite a bit too is I think there's a great balance to be had where, when you have opportunities for people to promote from within, I think it gives the team an extra shot of booster morale. It's like, oh, great. Like kind of, one of us took the next step. That's awesome. And I think on top of that, though, what I like to do is when it works out is, you have a certain amount of promotions internally. And then every now and again, I do think it's really healthy to have an outside shot. Someone comes in and because one of the things, especially like in retail, that I see happening with companies that I've been with in the past or that I've worked with or as peers is that some companies I've worked with only promote from within as a rule. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is when you go down the path, let's say that that's cool for the first couple of years, but let's say you're 5, 8 years in and you've only promoted from within. Then I feel like what you do though is the downside of that is you create a culture of groupthink where everyone thinks the same and the ideas are the same. And you're kind of just like, yes, it's cool. We're all promoted from within, but sometimes you miss out on like, there's actually all this really cool stuff happening in other organizations or from peers or whatever. And we're not getting any of it. You know what I'm saying? So every now and again, you like pull someone from the outside. It's like, oh, here's some cool ideas. Here's a different way to look at it. And then it kind of level sets and raises the bar for everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that fresh perspective can be very helpful too for the organization.
Yeah. So tell us a couple last questions.
Hmm.
Since this is obviously authors and getting to know authors and kind of what, drove you to do the book and whatnot, tell maybe aspiring authors or people that have these ideas, right? So obviously you wrote children's books, you've been doing this consulting for a long time, you've seen what's worked, and eventually you decide, hey, I'm going to put this into a book. As you mentioned, like a lot of it was just you'd been writing along the way, so you had to just kind of package it together. But for someone who has this idea is like, I think I could make a book about it. Like, what worked for you? How did you actually sit down and get it done?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, I had been writing along the way. So when I was going to make it a program, that's when I actually realized I had a book. And I actually have another book, Gratitude Infusion. And exactly, I was going to add gratitude to Culture Infusion and then realized I had a book too. So I think the best way to go about it is, let's say you want to sit down and this is what I tell people all the time, create an outline of what your key points, and then just pick one at a time to write about. And don't push yourself to write. And I know there's a lot of rules out there, you got to sit down every day and write for an hour or two. But I feel like it's better when you're inspired.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when you have that outline and you have key points and you kind of sit with it, then the ideas will kind of formulate in the back of your head. And then you can be better when you're sitting down to actually write it out. And I'd say also read a lot, read what other people say about a similar topic, because you'll get ideas as well. And you don't want
Yeah.
to create the similar type of book.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that's great advice. It's been interesting. I think this is the eighth podcast I've done on these authors here that is launching soon. But I've asked everybody at the end that's exact question, right? Like, how did you do it? And I think the moral of the story is that everybody does it a little bit different. And then obviously that's okay. Whatever works for you. But I like the idea of like, hey, be inspired, because there are definitely people that I interviewed that said that, like, hey, I actually just booked out an hour a day. That's what I did. But then they said also with that, you have a lot of days where you're like, I don't have it, so that's the challenge versus wait until you're
Right.
inspired. It sounds great too. But then I think there's probably some people's personalities where then they would just be there for years and never finish.
That's true. That's true. And then I agree. It definitely has to be what works best for you. I think the outline, you just go back to the outline though. I think many times you might just start writing without that, and that can definitely help focus you and focus your energy.
Yeah. So last question. So if somebody wanted to get the book, get in contact with you, learn more about it, what's the best way for someone to go about that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as Kerry Wekelo, and the books on Amazon. All my books are on Amazon. You can just search Kerry Wekelo or Culture Infusion, Gratitude Infusion, and they will come up.
Nice. And so I know you mentioned, um, you know, consulting and life coaching and all this kind of stuff. So if someone wanted to get connected more that way, same thing, just LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Best?
LinkedIn is definitely good, or you can go to our website at actualizeconsulting.com, and there's a contact us there. I mean, and the whole management team's there, so you can easily find me there for sure.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So I lied, not last question. Last question. So as an author, and you mentioned, one of your strategies too is read other books or whatever. So as someone has had children's books and now a business book, what is your, I would say, like, if you had any book recommendations for people out there that you got a lot out of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's Leadership and Self-Deception, Getting Out of the Box by the Arbinger Institute. And it's a really good, it's a fictional story, but it's very easy it's a really quick read, and it really taught me a lot about accountability, and how you should always take accountability in every single situation. And I think it's something that I always go back to, and I love the book. I read it, it's one of those things you just want to read every couple years just to make sure that you're still on track.
That's awesome. Writing it down right now. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And we didn't even mention earlier, but the way that we got connected was through her nanny.
That's so funny.
That's right. I just was thinking about that. I'm
Mhm.
like, wait a minute, we got
Mhm.
connected through her nanny a long time. How do you even know her nanny?
We were connected on social media, and we've reviewed each other's books, and I think I don't think I know, I actually even have a little piece in his latest book.
Nice. I do as well. That's
There you
awesome.
go. There you go. I'll
Yeah.
have to go
So
back and check it out now that we've that we've met.
I know. I have I'm just part of the forward, and so I think I'm the last one. So and
Okay.
I
All
know some
right.
of the other people that did forwards, and they were like, well, they're like, well, you're the last one, so you're probably not as important. But at least I'm on
Oh,
there.
that's not true. That's not
No, I know.
true. You're
But yeah,
very
he's an amazing
important.
guy,
He
and
is.
so
Yeah.
I definitely want to take a minute to shout him out. So I'm glad that he connected us. And then, so for everyone out there listening, make sure you check out Kerry's book, connect with her on LinkedIn. And then, as always, thank you so much for listening, and thanks for being a guest. That was awesome.
All right. Thank you.